go. Good afternoon, everyone. Please excuse the kind of gravelly voice. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. And yes, we are going back to Down the Rabbit Hole. And as promised, we are now going to deep dive the most infamous person within the last recent several handful of decades in regards to the anti-vax movement, Andrew Wakefield. This individual and his little cult of pseudoscience true believers have been individuals that not just myself, but pretty much the majority of everybody that's been a part of the neurodivergent rights movement, the earlier autistic rights movement, the overall disabled rights movement, along with mainstream medical model, we've essentially been at war with this guy for decades on end. And in regards to true believers, you see, this is where I learned that lesson before I got involved in fighting against the JRC. Because no matter what you tell this man's little disciples, no matter what evidence you put in front of their face, no matter what study you put directly, physically, right in front of their eyeballs, they are always going to have a far out, trigger warning, we curse on this channel, batshit insane conspiracy theory as to why that study is wrong. The usual go-to usually is along the lines of, well, Big Pharma funded it, so it's not a real study. Yeah, now sometimes you can push that conspiracy theory with folks, but when you use that conspiracy theory in regards to anybody that pushes back against Wakefield's insanity, is that they literally use it against everything. Objective university, such as Columbia, up here kind of the northwest part of my state, where I donated some DNA. In regards to the study, we're talking early 2000s here, several years ago, right? You put that study in front of other people's face. Now, I've had cordial partnerships with Columbia University out here in Missouri for going on, well, I'd say at least 2 decades, at least starting about around 2006. Oh, no, almost 19 years. 19 years. If there is one place on God's green earth that I am 100% sure is not being completely and utterly controlled by Big Pharma, it's Columbia University. For the love of God, I live in a paranoid GOP hellscape who believe some of the weirdest crap in regards to medical care that I have ever come across. And I've seen some good ones out there in a few of the other states, especially out in California. Okay? See, I'm not left or right side, I'm just equal opportunity. If you're stupid or insane, I'm coming out against you. Regardless of which party's agenda you are carrying the football for. because I don't care. Right? Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and start deep diving this study that has unfortunately had very, very rotten fruits and is living now to not just haunt a small group of us like it did back in the day, but just very much may haunt the entirety of the world, and the consequences of the actions being taken by these irresponsible individuals because they would rather have a conspiracy theorist with a famous name than a professional that has actually worked in the field to head our public health. It's going to be pretty dire, folks. The fallout is not going to be pretty. Okay? In fact, later on, we're going to be getting into the histories that I have mentioned barely here and there in regards to the absolute devastation that have been reaped by smallpox, by measles, by all these things these parents are laughing off. Alright, so here at Spilling Tea, straight to the trigger warnings for these particular Down the Rabbit videos. On this channel, we have it marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity on occasion, and we definitely cover some dark subjects. If your child's 16 and younger and watching this, parental supervision is advised. Every article that we go through for the Down the Rabbit Hole series covering the anti-vax movement, anything in regards to covering the potential threat that Medicaid cuts could have, as well as all the videos in regards to the JRC, every single article, every single time will be always found in the description box. So please feel free to pull them up, take a look for yourself. I am a great champion on Don't Trust Me. Take a look at the receipts. Make up your own mind and be your own voice. Alright, I got some allergy issues, so cough drop. Sorry about that in advance. This is what happens when you have a major storm out here strong enough to rip out an old tree by the roots and throw it halfway across the street from being right next to your mailbox. Thank you, Bible Belt. That also happens to somehow be Tornado Alley. Alright. So, who is Andrew Wakefield? Andrew Wakefield is a former British gastrointestinal surgeon who is particularly interested in the inflammatory bowel diseases. So in other words, kids, this was not a physician with any expertise in regards to neurodivergent children or adults. His specialty was in something entirely separate. Not saying we don't have some gastrointestinal issues. A lot of us do. I am 40. I was diagnosed with acute gastritis when I was, middle school. Full-blown acid reflux kicked in and was diagnosed when I was 16. But yeah, that's still not the guy I'm going to go to in regards to my autism diagnosis, nor would he be the person I would go to in order to obtain the diagnosis, or to see if I had it or not. Just say. In 1988, Andrew and 12 additional co-authors released a study that suggested the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine was linked to autism and bowel disease. Hence the whole Jenny McCarthy, if you use everything gluten-free for your child, it will cure them. Bullshit. I did kind of actually do that experiment, large part, because I'll admit it, I'm a major smartass. It is a consequence of hanging out with my older brothers probably way too much. But you know what? My older brothers are awesome, so deal with it. The publication gave birth to the anti-vax movement as we know it now. I want to indicate, although it's not saying it here, that this is what rejuvenated the anti-vax movement. It's always technically been around, having started really like back in the 18th century when the first developed smallpox vaccine was first brought to the forefront. But as far as the major numbers of individuals who have jumped into the movement since then, it started with this study and this smug, lying, grifting son of a bitch, who probably should better hope to God he never ends up in a room alone with me. Sorry, that's barely concealed rage. You guys have no idea. The paper that spawned the most modern version of the anti-vax movement and some of the most hateful, ableistic behaviors and millions of snake oil salesmen ever since. Some families literally going bankrupt on fake cures because they trusted this man. But let me continue. This publication gave birth to the anti-vaccine movement despite the retraction of the article by the Lancet in 12 years following the initial publication. Folks, what do we know in regards to bogus claims? The public loves scandal. I don't like scandal. I don't like being up in anybody else's business but my own. But the public, unfortunately, has a taste for scandal. Which is how we end up here. You know? Yeah. Sorry. Let me go again and continue here. The reason why I'm making that point. Scandals, allegations, false claims, that's what grabs the public's attention. Retraction of those claims, court cases that prove claims and allegations false, things that come back later to show you what was being said is not true, does not get the same amount of traction that the original allegation, once published, does. And for that reason, people will continue to believe the allegations until kingdom come. Even if you do present them with the fact that the article was retracted and the reasons why, because it's not put in their face, not out there quite the same way that scandal usually is, they're not going to believe you, and generally will believe that you are a part of the conspiracy. I have on multiple occasions been accused by numerous individuals that I was getting paid by, let's see here, Big Pharma George Soros, the medical model of all things. I am one of the harshest critics in regards to the medical model, especially for us neurodivergent folks out there. So that one never made a whole lot of sense to me. But anyways, that's the problem. Get a scandal like this, get a taste of that conspiracy theory, you're going to get the clicks, you're going to get the public attention, and when we're talking late 80s, early 90s, it's what gets you front page in the tabloids. Retractions always get the smallest print, either right in the back of the newspaper or buried on page 6. Do you ever read page 6 of the newspaper? Exactly. Alright, so let's get into it. Everything wrong with the Wakefield study. Conclusions drawn based on 12 case reports. No control and falsified data. So, why is this bad? Not only is 12 a very small number, preach it. A lot of case studies, especially when we're talking autistics here, have very large number of folks that are participating in it. Okay? Anything sitting below 12 is going to start looking really, really suspect. 12 is suspect enough. But case reports are often subjective recalls of one's medical history. Boom. Why is this pertinent? Because the story, and I have heard it from multiple parents, I'm not discounting what they observed, I'm discounting what they believe to be the cause. So what happens? They take your two-year-old in to get their appropriate shots, right? All of us 2-year-olds had to go, our parents took us to get the regular shots, right? And then the parents would say right after the shot, the child began regressing, correct? Got weird with their motor skills, suddenly wasn't hitting mile markers when they were previously. Now, this is not a theory that I can prove. I am no doctor, and I certainly have no form of a medical degree. The things that I know and tend to be an expert in is in another part of the field. But if we take a look at human development, in particular when a child becomes about around 2 years old in particular, why is that singled out? First, let me ask a question. About how many mile markers are you expected to hit from newborn to 2 years old? What are those expectations? What does that look like, right? Supposed to be healthy, crawl. You start maybe learning a little bit how to walk within about maybe year and a half. You get where I'm going. Pretty young. I do not have kids. I have nieces and nephews. But that's a particular time when the brain really starts to begin to develop and move away from your more baby phase, for lack of a better way of putting it, right? This is when you start learning better speech patterns. That's a mile marker that you don't have to really be worrying about too much between newborn till about around that age, right? The crawling, being able to crawl, being able to alert parents when you need a change. You see where I'm going here, right? Now what happens when you're 2? The mile markers begin to change, right? This is when we start paying attention to more development of speech and language, correct? About around that age is when you're supposed to begin to have a little bit more aware interaction with other people that you're not really expected to do outside of your parents for those younger ages, right? So you go to 2. That's what you have when you're 2, right? You have daycares, right? Right? And this is when a lot of people start noticing things. Why? Because when you're not really primarily any longer mainly in the home, you're having to interact with other 2-year-olds when you're 2, right? So yes, if you are having more difficulties in forming language, in having contacts with the other 2-year-olds in your daycare, that's when these things are going to be a lot more noticeable. Wouldn't you think? I've never really heard anybody discuss that before, though. Now, this is my opinion. Remember where my expertise in this field is. That is not it. This is just more my own thoughts here. The reason why you felt like they regressed is because by age 2, the mile markers begin to change, and that's supposed to be the age where the child gets more accustomed to being around and communicating better with those who are around them. It's a lot more noticeable when you're 2 than, say, the mile marker of learning how to crawl. Right? But most of these folks don't even think of that. What they see is big scary needle, and then everything regressed. Believe me, I've had that argument. And even though it occurs within the same time frame of them receiving those shots that we all receive it too, doesn't mean that the shot is at fault. But for reasons that are far beyond me to be able to wrap my brain around, that seems to be the only thing, the only cause that parents will absolutely insist caused it. They are not even willing to look at anything else. That is my point, and that has been the point of the rest of the medical model for decades, ever since that paper first came out. You can't just point to something and say, well, that happened, and then they weren't meeting the mile markers, so obviously that is the cause, and then close yourself off to any other explanations. That is not rational. Sorry. Let me get back in here before I take you all down another left field. Alright? Okay. While useful in some scenarios, further investigation into the Wakefield study and follow-up interviews with the families of the children used in the study revealed that Andrew Wakefield manipulated the data to support the conclusion that the MMR vaccine is indeed linked to autism. So we're going to look at a couple of these excerpts here. They have it marked in blue. Child 4 was kept under review for the first year of life because of the wide bridging of the nose. Wakefield et al., 1988. Now there is this weird thing. I've always thought it was weird. where you might be autistic if your nose looks like this. I don't understand it, although we do. Almost all of us have some facial features that look like one another. To me, that's not necessarily an indicator of whether or not you might be autistic. It's just confusing. I mean, hey, we do have similar features to one another. I also have similar features to individuals like me who are kind of built like birds with like long limbs and legs and everything, but are short. That doesn't mean people who are built like that are like me. Just saying. He was discharged from follow-up as developmentally normal at age 1 year. So let me get this straight here. This individual kid came in as a newborn and he was under review for a year. Infanthood to 1 year old. What are the mile markers that he's expecting within that time frame? Because, I mean, I would think crawling would be a thing. You know, starting to kind of learn how to make little sounds. Sometimes take a few small steps, a short walk. Like, at least as I know of as of right now, we do not have any way to detect in a child that young whether they're neurodivergent or not. Usually when that becomes more visible is as we are getting older and expected to be more and more social and interact around more people. So that's just confusing. Especially back then. Especially back then. Now you may be able to get away with it a little bit, but back then especially, what was he expecting? In reality, the medical records of Child 4 highlighted concerns with head appearance, recurrent diarrhea, developmental delay, general delay, and restricted vocabulary. They're 1. If they are 1 year old and randomly out of nowhere they start belting out a Shakespearean soliloquy, I am busting out the holy water and sprinkling on it while screaming, "The power of Christ compels you." Okay? For real. Like, when you're 1, everyone has restricted vocabulary. Like, for example, I've been told by my aunt when I was young, like, we're talking about around that age up into my 2s, that I had a decent vocabulary for that age range, but I really learned how to talk by mimicking others in deadpan. So like my aunt would say the word parrot, and I would say it back in monotone. I know, creepy. I don't care. That kind of actually makes me happy. This is because I like horror movies, folks. Sometimes you gotta scare your relatives once in a while. It's good for them. Keeps them on their toes. Sorry. I have to be lighthearted because some of this crap is so hard to read. The stupid is real, it burns, and it's dangerous, folks. Interestingly enough, these observations were noted prior to the child receiving the MMR vaccine. You don't say. They were 1. Now, my brother was born, and like the first month of his life, from what I've been told, he was very, very sick. Particularly in regards with his bowels. My brother, although very much a smart ass, I love my smart ass brother. At the same time, he's neurotypical. He's very neurotypical. Okay? So, who even trusted this guy? I've known about him, I've known about his study, but like reading more into the details instead of just going over the damage of what his idiocy has done, it's kind of a trip, folks. Alright, questionable ethics. Wakefield was charged with the General Medical Council of England, also known as the GMC, for unethically obtaining blood samples that were used in the study. Wakefield offered a €10 incentive to the children that attended his son's 10th birthday party for providing samples. Jesus Christ. Of all the absolute no fail-safes, no actual normal labs at a birthday party. I knew it was bad, but oh my God. Financial conflict of interest. This I did know. If questionable ethics isn't enough to fuel doubt in the study that has instilled fear in so many, the financial conflict of interest may. The UK journalist Brian Deere, oh my God, I love that guy. He used to have a website. I was on there constantly, like every single day in my 20s. I use a lot of his stuff to deal with a lot of anti-vaxxers. His research is extremely thorough. He's very, very good at what he does. Discovered that part of Wakefield's funding came from a lawyer who was in the midst of an anti-vaccine lawsuit for parents under the belief that the children's medical conditions were triggered by vaccination. That, children, is called conflict of interest. And not just that, and I'm sure it may actually have it somewhere else in here as we continue to go through this. During the time he was condemning the current MMR and making these claims, he quietly patented an alternative to the MMR vaccine there in the UK to replace the current one. He copyrighted it too. So he had conflict of interest on more than just one front. Alright, and failure to replicate the results, yes, please, thank you. While Wakefield still stands behind his original study, he has failed to replicate the results and provide the public with data that supports his original conclusion. In fact, there is currently no reputable evidence that exists linking the MMR vaccine to autism. To date, folks, to date, every single time this has been studied, nobody has been able to replicate the so-called results of the original study Wakefield published. No one. I mean, literally no one. I live in a GOP hellscape that thinks essentially that everything medical model is from the devil. Okay? And even they, Columbia, MSU, or SMSU, as back then they would have been called back in the day. Not even out here was his results able to be replicated. And what do we know about science? You gotta be able to replicate it. Right? Let's read the little blue spot here. In this large sample of privately insured children with older siblings, receipt of the MMR vaccine was not associated with increased risk for autism spectrum disorder, regardless of whether older siblings had ASD. These findings indicate no harmful association between MMR vaccine recipient and ASD, even among children already at higher risk for ASD. Also known as, wouldn't you know it, neurodivergent folks are usually attracted to other neurodivergent folks, whether we realize at the time we're neurodivergent or not. This is a weird phenomenon that I kind of found a little bit fascinating. We're going to go down left field for a moment, folks, but we innately are drawn towards our own. Like, most of my friends I've had throughout my life, for example, going through high school in particular, as we got older, a lot of them ended up being neurodivergent too. ADHD, they're autistic like I am, and what of the diagnoses that fall under that umbrella? It's like we're drawn as moth to a flame, folks. And honestly, I always feel like it's an innate feeling of safety that we feel around those individuals. Because usually they're the ones who are not showing open hostility and judging us, even when we commit our extreme social faux pas. I think that's part of it, that feeling of safety and camaraderie. Yeah. Anyways, sorry. Side note. Let me get back to where we were. Among many, a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, also known as JAMA, failed to find a relationship between MMR vaccine administration and autism in a sample size of, this is far larger than that original study of Andrew Wakefield's, 95,727, which only further debunks Wakefield's original claim, which was based on 12 case reports. I mean, if anything should convince you that what Wakefield did was garbage, you cannot compare a case study with 12 kids, 12 different samples, to a similar clinical study with over 95,000 of them, and claim, but obviously yours is correct. Because if you do, I'm sorry, but please put down the crack. What happened to Andrew Wakefield? Alright, let's get into that. Following the Lancet's publication of the Wakefield study, MMR vaccine rates in the UK dropped from over 90% to 79%. In the years to follow, the UK experienced its first measles-related death, as well as a measles outbreak affecting upwards of over 1,000 individuals. 2004 was a pivotal year. Yes, that was when I first found Brian Deere, and I've loved him ever since. A Sunday Times journalist investigated the financial conflict of interest in the Wakefield study, while 10 of Wakefield's co-authors retracted their support for the idea that the MMR vaccination is a risk factor for the development of autism. Finally, in January of 2010, the Lancet retracted the Wakefield paper, and Andrew lost his license to practice medicine in the UK. So, if this is not a good indication of who they base, who RFK Jr. bases his very flawed and repeatedly debunked hypothesis in regards to what causes autism, I simply do not know what will, and I will have to say that you are one of the true believers, and there's no form of evidence that we could ever present to you in any way, shape, or form that you are actually going to accept. But I have to do these videos and get the words out there to those who are not so familiar with this subject. Because right now we are in a situation that can go catastrophic extremely quickly in regards to overall public health. Right now, our world is still benefiting majorly from herd immunity, because the majority of us from the boomer generation on down have been vaccinated. But as the boomers get older and they pass on, and then we have a major world power, us, America, us, and our leaders are toting this nonsense and pushing this idea forward. And you have parents choosing not to get their kids vaccinated from diseases that literally used to wipe out full civilizations. I am not over-exaggerating here. We will get into the history of pandemics, of smallpox, of measles, and what it has done throughout history, probably within the next video coming up this weekend. Next weekend. And that's going to be probably a multifaceted one as well. But this is where it all started, folks. And on that one, I'm going to go ahead and close out for today. We don't get very many views on this channel, and the few we do get does tend to get removed from time to time. So, folks, if you could be so kind, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Please don't forget to hit the comments. We are going to make sure that this article is right there in the description box for you if you like to pull it up and read it yourself, and read some of the linked sources down at the bottom of the page. As always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea absolutely do hope you have a good one. I will see you all tomorrow when we'll get back to our Medicaid series. Bye-bye, everyone.